You know what's a surprisingly universal experience that very few people talk about? Getting nervous when you're about to ask a question. Now, this might not happen in every situation. You might be totally great at asking questions in a class or at your weekly team meeting or to your boss. But most of us can identify a time when a situation when we're like, oh, I want to ask a question, but all of a sudden I feel really nervous and I feel really anxious and I feel dumb. And what if I don't like me? And I probably shouldn't ask this question, right? You start to spiral out and maybe you managed to ask your question, but probably you didn't because you got too freaked out. And that's really normal. So, hey guys, welcome back. Another episode of STEM Identity. I'm so glad you're here. I'm your host, Dr. Anna Hodshire. I have a PhD in atmospheric chemistry. I'm currently a professor of systems engineering at Colorado State University. This podcast is not affiliated with my teaching and research roles at Colorado State University, but it is a big part of my belief that there are so many tools, there are so many frameworks out there for helping us become really strong, confident, excited, creative, interesting scientists and engineers. And most of these tools, frameworks, etc., no one ever bothers to teach us. So either we're out there suffering or we're slowly learning. And I'm here to be like, you don't have to suffer and you don't have to slowly learn. Let's dive in this together. Let's talk about the things that matter and let's get better at them. As always, it really helps for people to find this show, this episode, whatever, if you share it with a friend. So if you're already listening, you're like, crap, yeah, okay. You know, there are those times when I really don't like to ask a question. And I bet my friend feels this way too. You know what? Just share with them now, right? Do it while I'm blathering through this introduction and you're not really thinking about tools. You just hit that share button, hit that like button. At some point, if you wanted to rate and review, super helpful. We live in a world of algorithms, so every bit helps. I really appreciate it. And it may seem like, okay, well, Anna, Dr. Hodshire, she has a PhD and she is a professor. Sorry, I'm an assistant professor. Let's make that very clear. And if you're not clear on the distinction, it means I'm not tenured. So assistant professor, but you still might be like, well, I'm sure you're fine and you don't get scared asking questions, Anna. And to which I would say, haha, I wish. I get super freaked out in very specific situations every single time for asking questions. And for me, it has gotten better over the years, but for me, the scariest situation is asking a question at a conference. So conferences, most of us are going to go to at least the occasional conference, and whether it's a trade show or a conference or whatever, right? These big kind of group things where all of a sudden you've gone from, I chill with the same 8 people all the time in my work group or my research group or whatever, to there's like 500 people here I don't know, and I know 2. That's really freaky. So I go to conferences. There's always going to be talks and panels and blah, blah, blah. And if it's a smaller talk, a smaller room, maybe there's only 30 people in the room, maybe I know like 10 or 15 of them, I can ask a question. It's not a big deal. Maybe I'll get a tiny little butterfly here or there, but whatever. You dump that entire conference, and I go to a few big conferences. I really hate them. I'm not a big conference person. I tend to go to smaller conferences, so maybe there's like 200 to 500 people total at the conference. So you dump me into that room where there's, every single attendee who managed to get up and make it to the 9 a.m. session and on time. And there's the keynote speaker or the cool keynote panel. And I have a cool question and I'm really excited about it. And I don't ask it because I am paralyzed with fear. I'm just like, nope, 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 nope. I'm going to sit here. I'm going to just do my breathing exercises. I'm going to panic a little and I'm not going to ask my question. And that's okay. Doesn't mean I'm a bad person. Maybe I'll have a chance to ask one of those people my questions later, but probably not, if I'm being honest, right? Like they're probably busy and My brain tells me they're important, too important for my questions. So the chance was there, the chance is gone. So how can we get better at asking questions? That's what this episode is about today. And yeah, there's some moves out there to make asking questions more accessible, which I think is really cool. So if you have some sort of hybrid meeting, maybe there's like a Teams or a Zoom chat, and you can just pop your question in the chat. No big deal. Sometimes the person, either the moderator or the speaker will be like, yes, Anna, can you come off, mute and ask your question? And you're like, God damn it. That's why I put it in the chat, bro. I didn't want to ask my question out loud, but here we go. By the way, if you hear chirping in the background, Juno Bird is actively engaged with asking questions. She's probably asking me questions right now like, why do you keep speaking? And this is really boring. And why did you put the blanket on me? It didn't put me to sleep. She has a cage that sometimes if you lower the blanket, she goes to sleep, but today was not successful. So that's okay. We just have a small musical background to accompany the tones of my voice. So anyways, so there's tools like Zoom chat, Teams chat, whatever, that might help. There's also at conferences that are mostly in person. What I've seen the most is called Slido. There's probably other tools like it, but it's basically just, scan the QR code and submit your question through chat. And then the moderator will ask the panel or the speaker the questions. And I think those tools are awesome. And I'm so excited they're out there. And also, those tools aren't always available. So what do we do when there isn't a tool available to us to ask our question? And then as a side note, things like Slido often allow you to submit things anonymously, which is really nice because if you're like, I don't want to ask my question because I feel like people are going to think I'm stupid, well, you can just ask it anonymously and then you don't have to quote unquote admit, right, that you didn't know that thing. But maybe there's no way to be anonymous, so you have to write your name or you have to ask the question. There's no technology there to help you out. So what do we do? As I already said in the beginning, I really, really want us to acknowledge how normal this is. I'm actually actively surprised, and I don't go around asking senior researchers in my field, do you get nervous when you ask questions? And it's really easy to assume that they're not nervous. And I really don't know, right? Like, it's definitely possible that there's some point that you hit in your career that you're like, you could dump me anywhere. Middle of a TEDx talk. Well, TEDx is like, all the small sides. So maybe like a full-blown TED talk. And I could stand up and I could ask a question and have no problem. Cool. Amazing. Good for them. I'm not there. If you're still listening to this episode, you might not be there yet either. If you are listening to this episode and you're like, I could ask a question on the moon. I could ask a question anywhere. Well, the moon is probably not that scary because there's no one up there, but good for you for still listening to the episode. I super appreciate it. If you want to tune out and just call this one a freebie, go for it. Or if you want to just drop in your chat your magic skills for, how did you get over getting nervous? Or maybe you just don't get nervous. That's awesome. I'm super happy for you. Genuinely, I know that sounded like sarcasm, but here we are. Okay, but for most of us, it's very normal to get nervous. And I do occasionally talk to someone that I'm like, this person's crazy confident. There's no way they get nervous and asking questions in certain situations or any situations. And they're just like, oh yeah. I had this conversation actually with my mom recently. And I don't remember what the specific situation is. She's one of those people that I'm like, what happened to me? Like, how am I genetically related to this person? She's super confident. She's healthy all the time. She's very social and outgoing and seems to be able to make small talk super easily. All these things that I really struggle with. Anyways, somehow she is my mother. And she just mentioned off the cuff that she was at some situation where she felt uncomfortable asking a question. And I don't remember the outcome of the story, but I don't think she asked the question. And I was like, what? Blew my mind. And it kind of clicked something in my mind as well of like, okay, this actually is really universal. It's actually really normal to be freaked out asking a question. Another thing I want us to acknowledge is that things that are highly activating, and Juno's just really going for it. So again, I apologize if we don't manage to edit her out of this. Things that are highly activating, in other words, they really get you nervous, they almost never go away overnight. And that's super annoying, at least to someone like me. Like, I'm definitely a person who I'm like, well, if I could wake up tomorrow and I could quit chocolate cold turkey, and I've done this before, for health reasons. Fortunately, good news, I am back to chocolate, which makes me very happy. Freaking love chocolate, like really dark chocolate. But if I can quit chocolate for over a year, then why the hell can't I quit feeling a certain way or acting a certain way overnight? And it just doesn't work that way, unfortunately. So we really have to just sort of accept that. And there's the option of like, well, if I can't change overnight, I'm going to do nothing. And that's not helpful either. So I'm going to encourage us to all lean into one step at a time over time. Small changes over time will actually lead to a really big change. I just finished recording an episode that I put out last week on my update to my 30-day curiosity challenge. And, on day 2, I wasn't feeling like so much more curious about everything around me. But by day 30, I was like, hey, I'm a little bit more curious about a lot of things around me. And this is really exciting. I'm really excited about this. One step at a time, over time. So that's the first thing about how do we get better at asking questions, is just acknowledging that it's normal to get nervous in certain circumstances, or maybe every circumstance. There is hope. I used to be nervous in every single circumstance to ask a question. And now I can think of lots of circumstances where I'm like, no worries. I have no fear. Ask questions of my boss all the time. I ask questions in class, even like I'm co-teaching a class this semester and I'm just like, hey, I have a question. What about this? Right? Like no fear, no problem. Still have places where I do get nervous. The next thing to do, and I know this is going to be maybe a little bit less conventional, but hang out with me, is that it can be helpful to understand why you're getting so nervous. So I'm going to walk us through basically mini parts work, and that's my own phrasing, but there's I don't know if you'd call it a tool or a framework or a philosophy, whatever, in therapy that its original name is internal family systems, or IFS. And I don't really like that phrase. I think I don't know, doesn't work for me. So my therapist that works with me that does IFS also calls it parts work. And I like that a lot more. And the whole concept, and again, I'm not a licensed therapist. I highly, highly, highly encourage you that if you're like, I haven't heard of this before, and this is intriguing, maybe this is a curiosity for you today, right? Like learn a little bit more about IFS or parts work. But the broad general concept, in my understanding, how I view it, is that we have all of these parts inside of us. So, maybe my biggest example before I started this type of therapy work would be that it always felt like I had a conversation going on in my head. I wasn't just sort of like narrating or chatting. It was like 2 people in my brain constantly talking at each other. And one person was just like trying to get along. And the other person was like, hey, you need to do better. You need to do more. Get to work. Get back to doing the thing. Why haven't you done it? Right? Like very controlling, task-oriented, chiding. And that part, dragged me, for better or for worse, through 10 years of post-high school schooling. I got several degrees out of, well, 3, it feels like several degrees out of it, right? It had its place in time. And after doing parts work for over a year with my therapist, I can now hang out for hours, well, maybe not days, but at least hours at a time. And that part is nowhere to be found, which is amazing because it was always there. It was always there riding me, being like, hey, you should be working more. You should be doing more. You shouldn't be resting. You should. Right. Okay. So that's one example. But you can use parts work in all sorts of circumstances. And I would argue that for me, at least, and this may not be totally true for you, but for me, and I don't feel like I'm a completely unique individual, so there's probably going to be at least a grain of truth for most of us, is that when I think, okay, I'm at this conference and I have this cool question that I want to ask. First off, I definitely do not think it's cool in the moment. I'm like, I have a question. I'm already nervous, right? What's happening is a part is just like freaking out. So here's an exercise that you can do with me now. I'll try to walk through kind of calmly and slowly and gently, or just listen to it, and you can do it on your own time. And so the exercise, and again, I am not a licensed therapist. Please, please, please do not take this as like a therapy session. Please just take this as, here is an interesting tool that has been translated through the mind of a scientist slash engineer, is being handed to you that might be slightly helpful. And if it is helpful, then there are ways to dive in deeper. Or maybe the way I'm presenting it right now is all you need in the moment. And that's awesome. So I don't have to be a therapist to help you, but if you feel like more help is necessary, please go find a licensed professional. Okay, that's my disclaimer. So the exercise that we're going to do is, first off, let's imagine a time that has happened when you wanted to ask a question and you started to feel nervous. So for me, my specific example is that there was a conference last fall at my university. It was one of those where everyone's in the same room. I don't know, maybe 200 attendees, maybe less, whatever. It doesn't really matter. We'll say 200 attendees, and it was a panel session. And at the end of the panel session, they're like, okay, open for questions, come to the mic, or we'll bring the mic to you. And I did have a question. Looking back, it was probably a pretty decent question. And I was so nervous. Okay, so that's my question. You don't need to choose a time that's quite that activating. You can choose just kind of a more simple time, whatever feels good to you. So, all right, so let's find that time and think about that situation. So for me, I did manage to get up and start walking over to the mic because I was going to ask this question, regardless of how scared I was. And you can probably feel this in your body if you start to tune in. Maybe right now, listening to me, you're driving, you're walking your dog, whatever, you're like, this is not the right time to do it, but come back to this exercise. And when you do, where do you feel these nerves in your body? I feel it in the front of my throat. I feel it in my chest. I feel it in my stomach. Everything's just tightening and getting really scared. A key to parts work is that you want to be able to get to the point, again, through my understanding, is to get to the point where you're listening, you're discussing, you're conversing, if you get to that point of talking to the part, with kindness, compassion, curiosity. If there's anything that feels like judgment or dismissal, that's probably another part jumping in. Anything that's kind of mean, if you're like, why are you so scared, part? Come on, get over it. That's probably another part jumping in. And when that other part jumps in, this is where working with a professional does become really helpful. You say, hey, other part, thanks for showing up. I really appreciate it. But do you mind if you just hang out? Like, you can hang out in the background. You don't have to go away. I'm not getting rid of you. I just want you to hang out because I want to talk to this part that's scared. So when you feel like you're actually talking to that part that is scared, you can see if it's ready to give you any information. And things that you can ask it might be things like, what are you afraid of will happen if you ask the question? So let me do that for myself. I'm tuning back in and I'm asking that part, what are you afraid of would have happened when I asked that question? Because the ending of the story is that they actually wrapped up the Q&A before I had time to ask my questions. So just didn't happen. I got to the mic, I stood there, but they were like, oh, we're done. I'm like, fine. Very good. So what was I afraid? And I did do this exercise beforehand because I knew that I'd be kind of in and out. Like, I'm not totally in the zone right now with this parts work on myself. So when I asked this before, what it told me is, I'm afraid people will think I'm stupid. Right. And yeah, maybe you laugh a little. You're like, okay, hey bro, we have a PhD. We're not completely stupid. But that's an answer, right? And you can ask the part, does it need anything from you? And when I asked this part beforehand, hey, do you need anything from me? It was like, no, I just want to be seen. And I'm like, okay, yeah, you can just be seen. And to wrap this mini parts work up, I'm going to encourage, you're maybe getting information from it. You're maybe not. Maybe you've never done this and you're like, this is really silly, but just give it a try. just have compassion for that part and ask it if it can step aside just in the moment while you're asking the question or you're getting prepared to ask the question. That part's welcome to be there. It doesn't need to go anywhere. You don't hate it. You don't dislike it. It's just there. It's a part of you. It's fine. But you're driving the car. It's not driving the car. You're in charge. It's not in charge. You're the adults. And you can tell it things about yourself. You can say, hey, I'm an adult. I've done these things in my life. I have these things. I have this job. This is who I am. And that part might be like, yeah, I already knew that. Or that part might be like, whoa, I didn't know that. I was just trying to protect you. And these parts generally, they're trying to protect us somehow from, some situation or situations that we might not be aware of from our childhood and so forth. So have compassion for that part and ask it to just be there, but let you drive the car. And the key here is every time you have a new opportunity to ask a question, every time you get this flare of like nervousness, is to keep parenting these scared parts, to keep quickly coming back and just saying, hey, I know you're here. It's okay. I'm the adult. I know you're afraid, but I got the wheel. Let me take this on. All right. Now that probably feels like a lot, especially if you've never done parts work. So let me give you a more sciencey, engineering, concrete type step that you can also do. You can pair with this, which is every time you're in a situation where you could ask a question, just practice writing down at least one question you could ask, right? Just, you don't have to ask it. Not a big deal. Just write it down. Maybe you have 2 questions, write those down. Why is writing down a question helpful? Well, it starts to show you that 1, you do have questions, and 2, that your questions are worth asking, because you might start noticing an interesting pattern where you write down a question and maybe your part is like, oh, I don't want to seem stupid. They probably already answered this, whatever. Then what if someone else in the audience asks a kind of similar question? Oh, well, that's evidence that that question wasn't stupid, that that question was interesting. What if no one in the audience asks a question? Does that mean that everyone got it? Or does that mean that everyone in the audience is struggling with something similar-ish to what you're struggling with? Maybe some people in the audience are nervous. Maybe some people in the audience are really bored because it was not a good talk or just not their topic or not their jam. Maybe some people are having a bad day. You know what feels terrible? Being a speaker who gets no questions. When I am a speaker and I get no questions, the signaling that I feel from that, which may or may not be true, is I did such a crap job and my talk was so boring that nobody could even come up with a question. So compassion, not only for yourself, but for the speaker, is actually really helpful in this situation, right? Consider other people's perspectives. Consider the speaker's perspective. They probably are hoping to get some questions because it shows that they did a good enough job that people are engaged with them. They also might be quite nervous of the questions, right? They might not be 100% confident in what they just presented, or they're just nervous in general, and they're really scared of a hard question that they can't answer. I gave you, when we were doing that little mini parts work, an example of like, okay, what did my part feel was afraid? My part was afraid that people would think that I was stupid. Other things that you might feel, or the answers that might come up for you, are I'm afraid of speaking in public, or I'm afraid of not asking my question well, or maybe I want to impress people and have people take note of such, like, I had such a good question, and have people be like, wow, that question blew my mind, right? Like all of these things that are real, but are they really the essence of you? Like, is the essence of you someone who is afraid of speaking in public? Or is that a part that's just like, I'm really scared because, I spoke in public once and I stumbled and someone looked bored and it felt bad, like you don't necessarily know all of these things in your intellectual mind when they're coming up, but they're there, they're stored in your nervous system, your body, and they're tripping you up. So even though it feels silly and weird, maybe, to do this parts work exercise, it can be really helpful over time. This is one step at a time over time. So we have started to write down our questions that we could ask. And then, if you're just starting out, build it up. Start asking questions in what feels like the lowest stakes setting first. So for you, this could be whatever. This could be you have a weekly team meeting of your closest team, and you're going to ask one question every single meeting or most meetings. Or it could be you're in a class and, I'm teaching a class right now, and it's the same for people who ask 98% of the questions, give or take, right? Like they're always just like, they're the ones that have the questions and they're going to ask it. And there's about 40 people in the class, and at least 30 of them have never spoken up once. And we're in week 7 or 8 at this point. One of those people might be too freaked out to ask a question, even though it's online, even though they could drop it in the chat, whatever. So that person could conceivably just ask one question in class next week. Maybe that's their lowest stake opportunity, and then start to build up. Side note, I totally forgot the first time I recorded this that, of course, a really good tool when you are about to ask your question and you're freaking out and you're getting all sweaty and your breath is getting short and you're nervous is the psychological sigh, or the cyclic sigh. So I introduced this in a few episodes ago, but if you didn't hear that episode, or if you just need a quick reminder, it's this trick where you breathe in slowly through your nose, one big inhale, and then you do a little extra inhale through your nose at the top, and then you slowly let it out through your mouth. And the really nice thing about this is that it's pretty subtle, right? I do it all the time. I do it in front of people, next to people. They don't really notice what I'm doing as long as I'm not breathing super loudly. And it calms you down quite rapidly, especially if you do 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cyclic sighs or physiological sighs in a row. So let me just demonstrate it real fast. I know the music is playing, so you might not be able to hear it very well, but I'll breathe really loudly. So one big inhale, one small one at the top, and then let it out slowly through your mouth. And so you're doing this instead of getting super nervous about your question. You're calming yourself down. You're putting yourself in a more grounded, calm, ready to go state of mind. Hopefully the first thing out of your mouth is not blah, blah, blah. It's your nice, cohesive question that you prepared and you're asking, and people are like, I'm glad that person is asking a question. I too have a similar question. All right, end of side note. You ask a question in a slightly higher stakes setting, and then higher, and then higher, and then higher. For me, my high stakes setting truly does feel like that conference of everyone in there, because it's a small field I'm in. So I'm like, well, if I ask a really bad question, then like, oh my God, everyone's going to just remember me forever as just no good. Doesn't know anything. That Anna, such a dumb question. It's not true. We make up these stories that people are thinking of these things, but do you really remember with crystal clarity anyone else's question? The questions that I remember, and I don't remember word for word, literally anyone's questions. And I've been doing this sciencey, engineering thing since 2014, we'll say, when I started undergrad. So the only questions I remember are this is a comment disguised as a question. And I don't remember the question or the comment. I just sort of remember the general tone around it. Similarly, I remember questions that seem a little bit like bullying. So the questioner is being kind of mean or digging into something or being uncomfortable. And, I think you're listening to this podcast because you're not a bully. So chances are really good you're probably not going to ask a question that's really mean. And even if you don't agree with the speaker, you probably have the ability, the skills, the knowledge, the heart to ask your question in a kind and compassionate way that still politely disagrees. It's not bullying the speaker. And I remember maybe one really insightful question. I don't remember the exact wording, but it was just a cool question from someone I really, really, really respect. So this whole story of, people are going to think this about me when I ask my question, maybe like as you're asking it, someone might be like, I know the answer to that or whatever, but chances are, one, if you had the question, someone else has a very similar question. And two, no one's going to remember. No one's going to pay that much attention. More attention is being paid to the panel person, the speaker who's answering the question. And even then, like, do we really remember a bunch of answers at conferences? Not really. We remember little dribs and drabs, but we don't remember the things that we're afraid that other people are going to remember about us. And therefore, it's pretty good evidence that other people are not going to remember those things about us either. So, this episode took a little bit of a journey. I was like, hey, asking questions is scary. It's normal. Now let's get inside of ourselves and ask ourselves questions. And maybe that felt weird or too much, but I'm going to encourage you to just be open-minded. And, if you're feeling really, really skeptical, that's fine. Go do some research about internal family systems, parts work, or maybe you're just like, this is not for me at this time in my life. And that's totally cool. And maybe in 4 years, something's going to happen. You're going to be like, whoa, parts work. That's where it's at. And that's cool too. I'm so excited to introduce you to parts work. If I have introduced it to you today, if you're like, what up, bro? I do parts work every day. I love it. Awesome. I love it too. It's so fun. There's all these like weird little parts inside of me that I'm like, what's up? You're really struggling right now. And I'm so sorry for that. And sometimes, it's upsetting and sometimes it's just sort of funny. I definitely was working with my therapist few weeks back and we were working with a couple parts and I had one of those judgmental parts pop in when I was trying to work with a, really scared and hurt part. And I bust out laughing and she's like, oh yeah, what's going on? I'm like, well, you know how when you have a dog that's kind of big, I've got 2 big dogs, like 60 and 80 pounds. I mean, not big, but big enough. And you can like pick up the dog from behind just by its front arms and kind of dance around with it. And she's like, yeah. I'm like, yeah, I'm just kind of dancing that part over to the side to sit down right now. Because it's in the way. And also I feel like having a little fun with it. So, have fun with your brain. It's a magical place. Let me just review the parts work because I was bopping in and out. So as a summary, if it's helpful, the exercise to do on your own time is to first imagine that time that you can remember when you wanted to ask a question. You went to ask the question and you started to feel really nervous, really activated. Feel it in your body. Try to identify where it is in your body because that helps you kind of visualize like what's going on. If you're a visual person, maybe the part looks like something. Maybe the part looks like a young version of you, or maybe it looks like a black box or a squiggly line or something. So feel it, maybe visualize it a little bit. Try to interact with it with kindness, compassion, curiosity. If you're feeling things coming in like judgment, probably means another part is jumping in. Acknowledge that new part. Say, hey, do you mind stepping aside? I'm gonna hang out with this part over here, but I'm really glad you're here. Thanks for showing up. Talk to that part a little bit. If it's willing to talk to you, ask it what it's afraid of will happen if you ask the question to help identify why is this nerves coming up? Why is this happening? Ask it if it needs anything, if it's willing to give you that information. Tell it about yourself. Hey, I'm an adult. I have these degrees or this job or whatever. And, have compassion throughout. And you are driving the car, not that part, and help remind that part, hey, you're super welcome to be here, but I've got this. I'm in charge. I've got the car. So for this episode, I would like for the learn and move your feet or we learned a lot of things and how can we implement even something? Kind of depends on where you're at in the question asking stage, but I think it's a pretty helpful exercise, kind of regardless of where you are, to do that, writing down at least one question you could ask in everything that you have this upcoming week. It could be a meeting, a seminar, a class, etc. If you're listening to this episode and you're like, I have nothing coming up this week. Well, okay, try to remind yourself next week or, whenever you do have one of those busy times, like, hey, I'm going to write down a question and then start making that a little habit. And, I always have a notebook with me and I'm always just scrawling out, question, blah, blah, blah. And I don't end up asking half of my questions. And some of them are more just like, I'm going to go dig that up myself. I'm not going to ask this question. I'm going to go look into it myself. I'm curious. I'm excited. And if you are ready to ask questions, whether it's in that lowest stakes settings or, something a little bit more activating. Try to remember to send out even just the smallest spark of compassion to yourself. Hey, this is scary, but we got this. And we're going to celebrate the win when we ask the question. And then send a spark of compassion to the person you're asking the question of. You don't know what's going on for them. They might be just as nervous as you are for other reasons. So I hope this episode was really helpful. Again, sharing with friends, subscribing, all those things, really great for helping other people find this episode and this podcast. I always do a song of the week, and this song of the week actually I feel is really appropriate because I tried to emphasize throughout, yes, asking questions is freaky and actually really freaking normal for most of us. And so this question, or the song of the week rather, is You Are Not Alone by Mavis Staples. And so Mavis Staples is the youngest of the Staples sisters, if you're familiar with them. And I discovered this song through kind of a roundabout way. A friend shared a podcast with me that I was not familiar with. It's called Norah Jones is Playing Along. So Norah Jones is a musician. She's been around for quite a while. And she has, honestly, one of the most delightful podcasts I've ever heard. She just talks to a musician every session. They're recording in a sound studio, so it sounds phenomenal. And they play songs together. And this was one of the songs that they played during Mavis Staples' episode, which I will put the link in the show notes because I just highly recommend you go listen to it. And it was so fun. And I had never heard the song before. Norah Jones makes me realize that there's so much value in pauses and time and interaction. And she is interacting with someone else. So that's sometimes more natural. I'm sure there's moments where I pause and you're like, what did the, app freeze? What's going on? Oh yeah. Okay. There she is. Right. But the pacing of the podcast is so deliciously slow. And I am so frenetically fast through much of my life that it reminds me of how life is musical and how music really sucks when it's played at forte, forte, forte at 160 beats per minute. And by forte, 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 I mean the FFF volume thing, which I'll be frankly honest that I don't remember what it actually stands for. It's not forte, forte, forte. Oh, it's fortissimo. I can't do it, guys. It's like fortissimo, but with an extra ISS. It's like Mississippi, just like smashed in the middle of the word. I'll post it in the show notes because I cannot say this word, but we always joked in music that FFF actually stands for forte, 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 which forte is loud F, and then FF is fortissimo, and then FFF is this mystery fortissimo word. Scary. Ooh, all right. That was a challenge that I did not see coming, but it was fun. So thanks for hanging out with me. Now, I did mention as I started into what can we do about getting better at questions is that, these things do not go away overnight, and that we want to, reframe from cold turkey to one step at a time over time. But that can be hard. That can be kind of a drag to do on your own. And I do one step at a time over time, but I have a team around me. I have my therapist, I have my somatic coach, I have other people that I work with to help me get back on track, to be like, yes, you are making progress. Things are fine. It is okay that you still kind of failed, maybe not failed, but didn't do great at this thing that you're hoping to do better at. Here's how we're going to get back on track. So I love my team around me. And if you're listening and you're going, yeah, I need to build up my team around me. I don't have the resources around me that I need to become the most awesome, STEM-tastic scientist and engineer that I want to become. I would love to be potentially part of your team. I work with people one-on-one. We figure out the shit and we get through the shit, right? Like, this is who I am. Like, you're not getting a highly curated, highly well-spoken person. You're getting a real human being who also has real problems, can deeply empathize with what you're going through, and can help you and can work with you. So there's a link in the show notes. Free call, 30 minutes. Let's just hang out. Let's talk about what's going on and how I can help you right then in the call. And we'll see where it takes us. Guys, I'm so glad that you're listening. I think that asking questions is such a service. It helps clarify in your mind something you were confused about. It helps let the speaker know that you were engaged and that you care enough to ask a question. It helps everyone around you who might have had a similar question, but maybe they weren't brave enough to ask this question. And it helps keep you curious, right? I'm going to continue to nail down on this concept of curiosity and the value of curiosity, because holy shit, guys, like, what are we doing as a scientist or an engineer if we're not curious, if we're not asking questions? And asking questions can be scary. So let's get better at it together. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. I really appreciate you. I hope you had fun. And we'll talk next week.